How did you develop your jazz and playing by ear skills?
In high school, I was very comfortable with sight reading, but I remember very clearly that I did nothing by ear or lead sheets because they asked me to play for our high school graduation. The music director gave me this lead sheet or chord chart, and she said, "Here you go, can you play from this?" Of course, right? Then that's either the dream or the disaster. I looked at this and I was like, I can't read it. I can't read a lead sheet.
Hey there, I'm Rachel Ehring, and you're listening to the Top Music Piano Podcast. Get inspired as we discuss creative resources, trends in piano pedagogy, ways to grow your income and streamline your studio, and new ways to engage your students each week. If you are a teacher who wants to go beyond the method books to create an innovative studio that fosters lifelong music makers, you've come to the right place.
Hello, piano teacher friends. Have you ever had a student come to you who is interested in maybe playing video game music or music editing or playing chord charts, and you just weren't quite sure what to do with that student? My guest today is Grant Kondo, and he has taught all of those skills and more to his students, and he has a system for creating a well-rounded student that is still focused on the particular student's interests. Before we get into all of that, here's a little bit about Grant. Grant Kondo is a dedicated music educator who teaches students of all ages, levels, and styles. Originally from Honolulu, Hawaii, he began piano lessons at age 6 and later performed extensively on both piano and tenor saxophone, including in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. After earning his Bachelor of Science in Psychology degree with honors from UCLA, he spent 3 years in Japan with the JET program, where he supported school bands and organized international arts performances. His passion for music ultimately led him to pursue it full-time, and he recently completed a master's in music education at San Jose State University. Here's my chat with Grant Kondo. Hi, Grant. Welcome to the show. I'm so glad that you're here with me today. I would love for you to introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much, Rachel, for inviting me to be on the show. I'm very honored to be a part of it. Hi, everyone. I'm Grant Kondo. I grew up in Hawaii, and I'm now teaching out of my studio in San Jose, California, United States. I've served as our president for our local chapter of Music Teachers National Association and have also held positions on state and national levels of MTNA. I'm an advocate for combining both traditional methods and repertoire with skills and styles of today. I love travel, which includes to conferences like NCKP, where I met you, Rachel, and also MTNA, where I met Tim Topham for the first time when he was the keynote speaker. Yeah, I'm a nerd. I'm also a nerd when it comes to anything in trip planning and transportation, whether it be planes, trains, cruises, cable cars, etc.
Oh, interesting. Okay, little known facts about Grant. Very good. Okay, so yes, you are very diverse in your musical interests. So we're going to get into some of that. But before we do, I would love to hear a little bit of your backstory. How did you get into music? Did you take traditional lessons when you were a kid, or what did that look like?
Yeah, well, perhaps like many of us, I started when I was about 6 or so. Although my parents, both of my parents, they're not musicians. You know, they might sing in the car, sing in the shower kind of a thing, but that's about it. They don't read music or anything like that. So starting in piano was just, for enrichment. And so through high school, I had 2 teachers. The first teacher was a student teacher, but she, interestingly looking back on it, we went through method books and we used Alfred Basic, and we didn't just use the lesson book, we used the lesson book and the performance book. And I read a lot of pieces. And so the result of that is I actually had really good sight reading. And we went through every single level. And so that was that. And then she moved out of town. So I went to another teacher in high school, and she was very, classically based and trained. And so I learned a lot of the techniques, technique and repertoire relating to classical music. And then on the side, I sight read. I played a lot of other music, whether it's pop music accompanying for my friends in a band who did solo and ensemble festival, anime, and even just a little bit of just whatever you heard on the radio, whatever people were listening to, because I felt like, I don't know, I just felt like I didn't want my parents to just listen to me play the same 3-4 pieces all the time. So I played for them a few, okay, let me give you a mini concert for 20-30 minutes, and then let me practice my whatever Chopin or Bach for the next, however long it was.
Well, that was considerate of you. I think I didn't want my parents listening to me at all. So I just played whatever I wanted. But okay, so you were a good sight reader. This is interesting because I think typically people are either a sight reader or a play by ear, but it sounds like you developed both. How did you develop your jazz and playing by ear skills?
In high school, I was very comfortable with sight reading, but I remember very clearly that I did nothing by ear or lead sheets because they asked me to play for our high school graduation, accompany our, everyone in the grade is singing and I'm going to accompany our grade. And the music director gave me this lead sheet or chord chart. And she said, here you go. Can you play from this? Of course, right? Then that's either the dream or the disaster. I looked at this and I was like, I can't read it. I can't read a lead sheet. I need notation. And so she was super kind, and like a week later printed out this. She made her own arrangement, like 7 pages or something like that. It was beautiful. And to this day, I feel so terrible because I wish I could take that moment back and say, sure, I can play the lead sheet, But that's how I know. I couldn't arrange or anything, play anything off the page when I graduated high school.
So what happened next? How did you learn? Because obviously you can read a lead sheet today.
It really started with Forrest Kinney, who, he was someone who always was at almost every conference, whether it was like the big state conferences or national conferences. And he'd talk a lot about what he called the 4 arts of music, which are improvisation, arranging, composition, and interpreting. Interpreting being, playing scores as written, but with your own interpretation. And, in a way, there's a lot of parallels between Forrest and Tim Topham in his ways of teaching, creatively. And a lot of times when people talk about creativity, they're jazz musicians. And so they're talking about like jazz specifically. But with Forrest, he was really, yes, he could play jazz, but he was really a bridge, classical and jazz. And he just talked about creativity as a whole. And as a side note, he had a great just philosophy on life. And he's one of the few people who just affected the way that I even think about how I live my life. Not just how I play my music, but how I live my life. And so that was really impactful to me.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I'm not that familiar with his work. Can you talk about the influence that he's had on your life?
It's like trying to talk about Tim, but without meeting him. And it's like there are certain things that he just had a great. First of all, he had a very great like aura. He always wore this, not your typical like black suit. He wore this like gray suit, and the way that he talked was just very genuine. And he was always giving presentations, creativity master classes. Even RCM, he did a little bit of work for the Royal Conservatory and doing some of his creative books. It's called Chord Play and Pattern Play. Chord Play is based off of arranging, playing from lead sheets, and that's actually the series I used to essentially teach myself how to play from lead sheets, and then Pattern Play, which is about improvising.
Okay, so it sounds like you took those works and taught yourself how to improvise, how to play by ear, all of these things. So tell me how that informs your teaching today. How do you incorporate those things into lessons with your students?
For my teaching, if I had to sum up my teaching philosophy in a short phrase, I want to be the yes man, or someone that really meet students where they are. And that also means, yes, that means, being caring and listening to them about their day and their lives, but also meeting them musically, right? If they say they want to play Bach's Goldberg variations, okay, great. Let's work on that. But if they want to play K-pop Demon Hunters or, Moana or whatever it be, then great, we can do that too. And okay, you want to play it fully notated and you have this great arrangement that you found, great, let's use that. Or if you are, rather play from a lead sheet, or you want to play for your church. I teach a lot of adult students. And so, I love adult students because they have all kinds of different focuses and interests and levels and experience. So I just want to be able to say yes to all of that. I mean, I have students who also, they're Swifties and they want to do songwriting or play the piano while they sing. And my goal is to say yes to all of that. I mean, am I a specialist in all? Of course, I'm not a specialist in all of those things, but at least I know enough to get them started.
Yeah, that's great. And Tim talks about that too, about having a student-centered lesson focus rather than as a teacher getting so stuck in what we love and how we were taught and teaching every student the same way. So I noticed on your website for your studio that you list all sorts of different topics that you cover with students. You mentioned electronic music production, video game music. So are these all things that you've explored? And how did you get comfortable enough to feel like you could teach all of these variety of things?
I already, growing up, I played a lot of different types of music. And so at least on that, on the genre or style of music, so to speak, I have a wide experience in that. But there are also other things where I teach the students to be resourceful. Let's say they want to do something like, electronic music production. And we look through things together. And, I talk about musically, we want to have what I call like the axes of music. So like melody, harmony, the groove, the instrumentation, and we look at it from that point. And then, but they also take the initiative to look at things like how to do mixing or how to change the timbre or, using different combinations of overtones. I mean, it's so part of that is just, I also teach them to find out the information you need is on the internet too. And so kind of and I really try to support them, but I also, I learn too along the way, always learning.
Yes, we all are. But I love that you're so open to learning all those different things and trying all those different things with your students. And I'm sure that they really appreciate that and connect to it. I'm curious, do you ever have students who just don't know what they like? I remember I had a student who I would ask her, like, what music do you like? Or what do you want to play? And she would just kind of be like, I don't know, whatever. I like Disney, but she wouldn't really give me much to go on. Do you have students like that where you have to kind of help them discover what they love?
Sure. Yeah, I know that's a tricky thing. And I kind of, it kind of goes with age a lot of times, right? You can't ask a 6-year-old student, oh, what do you want to play today? I mean, so the way and it kind of perhaps overly generalized, but when they're in elementary school, kindergarten through 5th, 6th grade, I try to be more, top-down approach, say this is what we can do. And what I'll usually do is I'll just play some different pieces based on what they have gravitated towards in the past, or just what I know about them. And that very vaguely directs our path. But when they get to middle school and especially high school, I mean, high school is almost completely student-centered. When I think about my high school juniors and seniors, and I think about the repertoire that they're playing, it's all stuff that they chose that they wanted to play. And, it's an interesting mix because, you might think, oh, well, then, they won't play any classical music or anything like that. But it really is a good mix of I have almost all of my students are playing something classical and something that's not. And so that's kind of the path that it goes.
Yeah, I think that's a really good baseline, is to have something that's classical and something that's not. I like that. I'm curious, Grant, do you have a favorite method book that you use with your beginners? I know I didn't tell you I was going to ask that, but I'm just curious.
No, I just love the question because, another person I met at NCKP along with you was ABR, Annabeth Rucker, and has her whole thing about method books. And when I first started teaching, that was the thing that that was a goal I had to really familiarize myself is with all these method books. And so I probably went through, I'd go to the music store and just look at them, and then I'd save up for the conferences, because at conferences they sell them 40-50% off. So yeah, whether it's Faber or Alfred Premier, Alfred Basic, Piano Safari, Music Moves for Piano, Hal Leonard, John Thompson. There's even the electronic ones, Piano Marvel, Piano Maestro. At least look through all of them. So, but you asked what's my favorite. Of course, my cop-out answer is I don't have a favorite, but I think that, but I will be more specific, So one thing that I really like Faber, I think they're as successful as they are because they have what I would call an ecosystem, right? They have everything. Yes, they have the lesson book and the theory book, but they also have Disney music and pop music and more classical music. And, Randy Faber, he is a great speaker. He's always active, always engaging. And if you've ever heard him play, he's actually an amazing performer as well. And so I think that is, and there's a lot of places to go. But as far as pedagogically, Piano Safari, I think is great because, they're one of the first to really incorporate and push for rote playing by ear playing, and also improvisation. Although I talked to them, I said we need much more improvisation in Piano Safari, but at least there's some. So that's definitely a start. I'm sorry, I'm looking here at my library. Piano Marvel or anything. So Piano Marvel is the one that you plug in to an electric piano. And so that's really great because it keeps students to the beat. It's a little bit maybe more mechanical due to the fact that, it's kind of gamified in a way. So they're not worried about the more technical details, but it really forces, they want to get that 100 score. And so it really helps them to keep them on the beat. So those are some that come to mind, immediately.
Yeah. So it sounds like even with the young ones, you're student-centered you're not using one method book with everybody. You're still kind of tailoring it to what the student needs and what they gravitate toward.
That is true. Yeah, I just had a trial lesson with a 6-year-old student, and they ask, what material should we buy? And I'm like, nothing yet. I usually take a few weeks to figure out what to do. And she's actually very creative. One thing I like to do is I'll play playing some simple accompaniment chords. And I just say, okay, let's play on black keys. And some freeze and go like, I don't know, what am I supposed to do? So then I help them. But some, they can literally just play with that instruction. And that informs me a lot about their musical intuition, about their personality. It's actually, I know this sounds like I was asked to say this, but actually one thing I'm also going to be using with that student is the notebook beginners.
That's what came to mind when you were talking about it. It sounds very much like what Tim does. Yeah.
So yes, I would definitely use activities from there. Probably, maybe, due to the fact that Piano Safari has a lot of those things, use that as well.
So you have recently published some books, and I want to give you a chance to talk about those. Tell us what they are and who they're for.
So I just published a book series in August called Skills for the Modern Pianist. And it's a 3-book series, beginner, intermediate, advanced. And basically, the way I would describe it is that, and it's a book that I wish that everybody had in their piano bag. So most people, regardless of what level you are, method book or, advanced, everybody usually has some sort of repertoire and some sort of theory and or technique, right? Maybe a theory book or scales book or etudes, something like that. And this third book kind of so my book can be used as this third book to supplement all of what I consider to be modern practical skills. So things like accompanying, improvisation, arranging, playing from lead sheets, and also even more discussion-based things like what does music mean to you, or how do we bridge generations between boomers and Gen Z, Gen Alpha, and other technical things that everything that I wish. Sometimes I wish I could just do a data transfer of all the things in my head into my student's head and say, well, but this is sort of the book form of that. So everything that I wish they knew, like how to pedal properly and good hand shape, what is proper posture, all of those things I've also included in the book. And they're just, the different levels are not based off of your repertoire level so much as kind of your comfort with doing creative skills and things like this. So if you already are familiar with very basic accompanying, you could start with perhaps the intermediate book. They do start from 0 in terms of arranging, like just play the root. If it says C, just play a C. But it does go up from there. And I guess the last thing I'll say is that each book uses the same piece. Beginner uses Mary Had a Little Lamb. Intermediate uses Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. Advanced uses Canon in D. One piece through what I call an apples to apples approach. So playing it in different variations so that you can see what does Alberti bass sound like with this Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, or tritone substitution, or playing in a certain mode, and all of those kinds of things.
So I didn't realize that you published them all at once. You're kind of an overachiever there, publishing 3 books at once. Why didn't you do one at a time?
That is a great question and an interesting story. You don't know about, but you will know now, because last year, 2024, at MTNA in Atlanta, I actually did a small, what they call an entrepreneur's corner, like just a little high top table with just me. And I was promoting this book that I thought would be called 88 Variations in Canon in D. Based off of the idea that Forrest Kinney, he wrote 88 birthday variations, and for his teacher who was 88, turning 88. And also, of course, we pianists love the number 88. So I thought, okay, I'm going to do that. But his was in 88 different styles, Happy Birthday in Chopin style, Happy Birthday in Rachmaninoff, ragtime, etc. But my idea was, okay, I'm going to do that, but I'm going to do it with theory things, because I love theory, and I think we need to bring theory to life. Sometimes theory books are so dry. So I thought, okay, we'll play Twinkle or Canon in D with Alberti bass, and Canon in D with arpeggios, and Canon in D with chords in the right hand. And, over time, it got more and more advanced. And then I had this appendix about modes, because people always ask, or even like other music teachers, they tell me, oh yeah, I understand modes, but I really don't know what they're for. I never think about them. Like I just studied for my music theory test. But if you are familiar with how modes can be used, there are just a lot of exciting flavors. And so anyway, I had an appendix on that. And then I had an appendix on some research things that I had put in, because I was actually a psychology major in my undergrad. And so some things that I thought would be really helpful for teaching and things like that. And by the time, eventually I had so many appendices, I was like, this is really kind of, can be its own part of the book, not just an extra appendix. So anyway, that grew out of that. And then while I was trying this with my students, I thought, wow, some of this is way too advanced. I mean, my goal was to, like I said, put everything that I knew into these books. And so some of the, like even things that I found really nerdy, like, when I discovered negative harmony through Jacob Collier, I was like, what is this madness? I think people should know about it. So I put that in there, but that's quite over the top for some of a lot of my students. I thought, okay, let me make a simplified simplified versions of these books.
Okay. So you kind of went backwards. You did the most advanced and then decided to simplify it a little bit. So tell me how you use the books with your students, because you said it's all this stuff you wish your students just knew with the brain transfer, but how do you actually use them practically in lessons?
So basically we kind of go through the variations so everything is fully, I know you can't, this is an audio podcast, but basically to describe it, there are, it's fully notated. So all the examples are fully notated, but also with chord symbols. So the idea is when you're not so comfortable, people look at the bottom two staves, right? The treble and bass clef. And then as you get more comfortable, then you just look at the top two, the chord symbols and the melody. So I have them play exactly as written, but then really encourage them to start making connections. So I will have them play it once through as written, and then a second time, I just encourage them to vary it up a little bit. They don't have to, but a lot of times they do. I mean, it might not be anything significant, but and it's even if it's simpler, that's still, people sometimes we think, oh, it has to be fancier. But no, anything that is different is different. So, and should be celebrated. So, and then we kind of go through it. Variation 1 does start simply, and then I describe it like layers. You add on more and more layers, so your playing can become more and more fancy. And it's so like the advanced one, or every book is grouped into different groups using, actually Forrest Kinney is the way that he talked about arranging through what he called styling, coloring, and subbing. So styling, and he always used a hair analogy. So styling is if you take your hair, you can comb it, you can brush it a certain way, you can braid it, but it's still just your hair. So if the chord symbol says C, we're going to play C, E, G only. But there's still a lot of things you can do with that, different octaves, different patterns. The next thing is coloring, which is about adding color to the chord. So just like you can color your hair, you can add color to chords, making it a C major 7 chord, or C add 2 chord, C6, all these other things. Fancy C chords, basically. And then the third is subbing. So that would be, so with the hair analogy, that's like getting rid of your original hair and wearing a wig or something that's not even your hair. And so musically, that's a lot of the reharmonization. Instead of a C chord, we might play A minor or A flat major, right? And how can these things fit in? So we talk about those. And the tricky thing, and the thing that I'm excited to hear when teachers use it, is unlike method books, these are not instructional, really. They just give you their variations, but they don't say, okay, there's very few exercises. It's not really a workbook. And so I leave it up to the student and the teacher to figure out, because that's the thing about arranging or playing creatively, is the process is so personal and so unique. When it comes to classical music, you do have to practice. You do have to learn your scales. You do have to play the correct fingering. You can't make up fingerings. You can't really make up your own like unusual technique. Maybe if you're like Glenn Gould or something, you can get away with certain things.
You mean like my students who try like play upside down, and I'm like, no, that's not what, like they turn their hand flipped. I'm like, no, that's not what I meant.
Yeah, or try 5 5 5 5 5 up the scale. It's a great fingering. So yeah, that's anyway. So it's been a very interesting adventure because it's very different for everybody and how they use it.
Yeah. So what is the response been from your students that you've used it with?
Well, the hilarious thing is a comment I get a lot is that my writing is better than my speaking. Because I always ramble and I always talk too much in the lesson, but when I write it in the book, I have to cut out all of those things, and they're like, "Oh, this is so." Yeah. So anyway, one thing I try to do is I use what's sometimes referred to as a flipped classroom model. Are you familiar with that? Yeah, right. So the idea that in a traditional classroom model, the teacher teaches you in the class or in the lesson, and then you go home and you practice or you do review problems, etc. But in the flipped classroom model, you try to learn it on your own. So, and then in the lesson, you review it, you ask your clarifying questions. The teacher can play it for you, etc. So, because one thing I was very passionate about is in every concept that I introduce, I explain it. I always talk about why it's significant, why is it helpful? Because a lot of theory books, they only explain the how to get the right answer, not why do we care. Like cadences, for example, is 1-5 or 5-1 or 4-1, the end, right? Why those? Oh, well, I mean, in fairness, it's hard to explain those things easily to an 8-year-old. So, I mean, of course, there's reasoning for that. But I think highly of students, and so I try to explain it anyway. And if it goes over their heads, that's okay. At least we try.
So talk to me about if someone were to go through these books, whether on their own or with a teacher, what do you envision would be the transformation in their playing or their knowledge of music?
The way I would summarize that is to really have a deep understanding and appreciation of music. Yes, I use a lot of lead sheets in theory, and so people think my book is about arranging specifically, but it's actually thinking about arranging and chords and theory has helped even my classical repertoire, and the way that I approach fully notated pieces, because I know really understanding these things helps give you an insight into the composer's mind, why they made the decisions they did, which in turn informs your performance of it. And so, so many pieces. The first one that just popped into my mind was the Schubert Impromptu in G flat, Opus 90, number 3. And so that piece has so many notes, but it's really just one, very basic chords that are just so nicely, subtly, put together. And so that's kind of my goal, is to really understand, give students a deeper understanding. And the subtitle, so the book series is called Skills for the Modern Pianist, but the sort of subtitle is Reimagining Artistry, Creativity, and Identity. So, artistry, a lot of times we think that, we like to say that, well, classical music is high art and pop music is for fun or something you can do on the side. But I believe strongly that there can be a lot of high art outside of classical music as well, and that's why it was very important for me to put high level theory concepts in here too, even though we're talking about lead sheets. And then of course creativity, but that also includes not just, a lot of times we talk about creativity like, again, for fun, like at the beginning level, like, oh, you're improvising on black keys, yay, you did it, the end. Now go back to Chopin. No, I mean creativity to all levels. And then also identity, just, okay, you can play great music. Now, do you feel something in your core? Or did you just practice a lot? And okay, but doesn't mean much to you. So that's something that I wanted to just start the conversation. A lot of these things, even if someone came to me and said, I disagree, or why are you talking about this? Like, I'm just happy because at least we're talking about it.
Yeah, it sounds like giving students an understanding and connection to the music in a much deeper way than just, oh, I learned the notes and I can play them in the right order, right? All right, Grant, thank you so much for sharing about this. Tell us where we can find these books. And I know you also have a new website that you've been working on. So tell us all the places.
The books are available on Amazon worldwide, at least in English-speaking Amazon countries. And also, so that's a paperback version. I also have spiral-bound, sort of this like higher quality spiral-bound version because it's easier to read spiral-bound music on Lulu. And it's Amazon does not print spiral-bound books, unfortunately. And so, but those will be available through my website as well, which is lifeoffthepage.com, which we are working on very hard to get it really up and running. But that's where everything's located. lifeoffthepage.com.
Okay. Well, thank you, Grant. Thank you. And congratulations on getting your book into the world. I hope that teachers will check it out and find out all the great nuggets that are in there. So thank you for being here today and giving your time to share with us.
No, thank you, Rachel. And thanks everyone for tuning in.
I hope that you enjoyed my chat with Grant today. In case you've been a bit busy with back to school activities like I have been, I want to remind you that there's a lot going on here at Top Music, and I don't want you to miss any of it. One of the things that I'm really excited about is that we have a composition competition coming up for Top Music Pro members and their students. The submission window is during the month of October, and winners will be featured in a future Top Music Sheets collection. So if you're already a member, be sure to watch for more information on that. And if you aren't yet a member, this would be a great time to join so that you and your students can get in on the composition competition. All right, friends, that is all for this week. I'm Rachel Ehring, and you've been listening to the Top Music Piano Podcast, and I'll see you back here next week.
How do you keep up to date with all the latest trends and research into music education? How do you connect with other teachers around the world and make sure your teaching stays fresh and relevant for students of all ages and stages, both now and into the future? I created our Top Music Pro membership to be the one-stop shop for music teaching resources, training, support and community, and I'd love for you to come and join us inside. With over 40 comprehensive training courses, hundreds of teaching demonstrations and lesson plans, free monthly sheet music, discounts, and all the business and pedagogy support you could ever need, Top Music Pro is the community you've been looking for. If you're ready to level up your learning from the podcast and join thousands of other teachers in our global network, head over to topmusicpro.com today.